You'll be happy to know that I've got mine in my nice Z specialty pretty
I
glass
got
from Valkyrie's Horn.
I got two of those downstairs. I should have grabbed one. That would have been smart. I felt like I should rep White Bear. So one of the few Minnesota meaderies.
The fourth of 2021's 12 Beers of Christmas is not a beer at all. It's a mead made with Sansho peppercorns and Carolina Reaper peppers for a double-spiced fire and ice effect, kind of like sitting next to the fireplace after being outside in the snow all day. I'm joined by Meadmaker of the Year Josh Holbrook to taste his Kung Pao Cousin and learn his process for adding just the right amount of pepper heat and flavor to traditional meads. Chop and Brew's 12 Beers of Christmas are made possible with support from Imperial Yeast and the Patreon party people. They're the ones who put the maple syrup in our coffee. Join them at patreon.com/chopandbrew.
What's going on, everybody? This beer of Christmas is not a beer at all. It is actually a mead that comes by way of Josh Holbrook. I said Holbrook for some reason. Josh Holbrook, National Mead Maker of the Year. You probably know him if you're a Josh fan from the month-long Better Judge a Mead series. Josh is in Brainerd. I'm in St. Paul, so we're on Zoom.
Much easier that way.
Yeah, dude. Cheers to you. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays.
Yeah. Merry Christmas, man.
Yeah, so what we're drinking for this mead of Christmas is the commemorative mead from this year's Valkyrie's Horn Mead competition. And Josh made that, and it was handed out as a thank you to judges and volunteers. It is called Kung Pao Cousin. And I'll let you tell the people what's in it, because there's something really awesome. The first thing and foremost that's in it is some of your own honey, of which I still have a little bit kicking around from the fall time. Yeah, tell me about Kung Pao.
Yeah, so this is a metheglin that I've made for a few years now. The base is basically a trad with my Holbrook, which is basswood honey. So the honey I get out of my hives is predominantly basswood honey. So I've had it tested a few different years, and it always comes back as very strong, high percentage basswood as the floral source for that honey, which has a lot of like minty and citrusy, like very bright and light flavor background for that. So I was just intrigued by like Szechuan peppercorns when I've had them in the past, and I've used Szechuan peppercorns in different meads before, and I forget how I got turned on to Sansho peppercorns. I think I was actually just ordering some more Szechuan peppercorns off of whatever website, and I kind of clicked over like, you might also be interested in Sansho peppercorns. So the idea is that they're like a more light citrusy version of Szechuan peppercorns. So I actually grabbed, this is my source, this is where I usually get them from, Spice House. So what's interesting using spices like this, age and quality really does make a difference. Like even the Sansho peppercorns I have sitting around now are kind of brown and not as green as when they first showed up. So here's kind of what they look like. You can see that they're actually getting a little bit brown. They're not as quite bright, vibrant green as when I bought them fresh. I mean, they're a dried spice, so obviously they're not real fresh, but you can tell the difference when you order different batches, and you can see it like this is much brighter and lighter versus it's getting kind of brown and there's a little bit of age and oxidation going on in there. But it's like a really pungent spice with like a lot of like light lemony citrus kind of notes. Like Szechuan peppercorns, when I've used them, have mostly been like a zingy grapefruity kind of thing. The Sansho stuff is usually more like lime, lemon, citrus kind of thing. And what I've tried to get into the beverage is the numbing quality that these spices impart.
I was going to ask you if these have that same numbing, because like all I know of Szechuan from like biting a raw one anyway. I've had Szechuan food that also does this, but man, if you bite just a peppercorn, you might as well have like taken Chloraseptic to the throat. It's wild.
Yeah, it's quite the experience. So I think the compound is called Sanshul. I think they say, because if you're talking about flavor compounds, it's like bitter, sweet, the different flavor elements. This is more similar to like a pain sensation, where it's like it causes neurological confusion, is what they say when you read into the chemistry of it. So it's like this numb tingling. It can make your tongue and even your whole mouth numb. If you were to eat this, like directly chomp on one or two of them, it's gonna
Oh,
make
no
it,
way.
yeah, numb or tingly for a couple minutes. So I really wanted to try to get that into the beverage, which turned out to, that's really hard to do. I've only really succeeded on that a couple times, and I've made batches of this stuff like, I mean, at least a half dozen times. So I think it really helps when I've used like a mortar and pestle to grind this stuff. I think that releases it a lot more than if I was just to chuck them in whole. And like for me, when I do most of my spiced mead stuff, no matter the spice or if it's a hot pepper, I always do tinctures. So I like to steep it in like a neutral spirit. If you don't want to use vodka or Everclear or something like that, you can use like a sax strength dry mead. So if you still want to have like mead as like the solvent, you can just do like a really high ABV dry mead as what you're steeping in for the tincture. But it doesn't offend me, so I use vodka, because really for something like this, when I do spices like this, so I grind this with a mortar and pestle. I steep it in a neutral spirit for usually a couple days, and I keep the little mason jar that I do it in the fridge, because this is like a really delicate kind of spice. So even if I leave it out at room temp, or if I leave it for say a couple weeks, it doesn't have quite the magic of when I use it when it's just a couple day old tincture. Yeah, so it really, freshness seems to be an issue with this sort of thing. I've done a lot of like citrus zest type tinctures too, and those seem to also have a very short shelf life versus like the hot spicy pepper tinctures that I make usually have a really long shelf life. They don't seem to lose much of their magic over even a couple of years. So it depends on what kind of spice you're using for that. So yeah, I make my little tincture, I grind it up, I keep it in the fridge for a day or two, really just to let that solution kind of settle and stratify. Because when I'm adding a tincture to a finished mead, I want to make sure that that tincture that I'm adding is really clear. So I'm not introducing sediment or haze or anything like that. And then I just add it to taste. I line up, my process is, if I'm talking about a 12-ounce bottle for competition, I line up 3 4-ounce tasting glasses and I pour that out. And in the first glass, I'll kind of take my best guess at how much of that tincture I'm adding. Oftentimes for something like this, I'm talking about like 2 milliliters in a 4-ounce glass. So percentage wise, it's like super tiny, especially when you scale up to a 12-ounce bottle. And that's why I don't feel bad about using a neutral spirit, because it's like, I mean, the percentage of the overall bottle that is the tincture is like 1%. So I don't feel bad about using a neutral spirit for stuff like that. And I just add it to taste. And most of the spices like this, I add it at bottling because I like to have the most control over it. And then, so, and I do the same thing. This also has Carolina Reaper pepper in it. Yeah. So I actually grabbed, this is my Carolina Reaper pepper tincture.
Ooh.
So I've had this around for a couple of years. It hasn't seemed to lose much quality. And you can see it's pretty darn clear. And this stuff is really potent. So when I'm adding this to a 12-ounce bottle, I'm usually adding between 2 and 6 drops. So it doesn't take much.
It picked up some color though. It's a nice, like, it's kind of orangish red, right? Almost in your jar.
The jar? Yeah. Because that pepper is kind of orangish red most of the time that you see it. And I usually
use a dried pepper specifically. Would you suggest that over a fresh one? Like, would you dry it first intentionally?
Yeah, I usually have them dried first intentionally because I think it minimizes the chance of getting vegetal flavors from the pepper.
Okay.
I know it's popular for people to take a pepper like this and maybe de-seed and get the membrane out and tie it to dental floss or fishing line and steep it in your mead and pull it out when you think that's the right heat intensity level. So that's like a popular approach for hot pepper meads. And I really dislike that strategy because I think it's totally like imprecise and shooting from the hip versus something like this where it's like, I'm going to add this many drops and it's very exact. Yeah.
Interesting. The only thing like that I've ever done, or I've done a few times, but I took like vodka, a couple of habaneros, just put slits in them and let them hang out. And like we've taken little teeny tiny shots as dares, but for the most part, we just use it like in sauteing onions for something spicy, or we'll put like a teaspoon in a giant pot of chili.
Sure. Yeah, it ends up being pretty potent stuff. But like I said, for tincture process, I use that for all my hot peppers. I use that for almost all my spices when I'm making meats because I just like the precision of it,
Mhm.
especially if it's for a competition. Because like all, if I'm sending say 3 bottles to a competition, I'm gonna prep 4 bottles that I dose, and then the next day I'm gonna crack one of those and say, okay, did I hit the balance right, or was it off and I need to readjust or start over?
Okay. So you're doing this per bottle. I think you've kind of set that up. Like this is something that you basically put a basswood trad in a bottle and you knew the drops for these other two elements. And then as long as
Yeah,
you're happy with the test one the next day, you consider it a done deal for whatever batch you bottled.
yeah, I've done it for the whole keg before. Say if I'm bringing a keg to an event or a party or something like that, I'll do the whole keg. But if I'm getting like really like futzy, like picky with like competition stuff, I always do it per bottle.
I'll tell you what though, at first I was like, oh, you get a little of that Reaper heat. That's nice on the back of the throat. But now that we've been talking here for like 10-ish minutes, it is really starting to numb the outside of my lip, the back of the tongue is starting to get that like antiseptic-y kind of almost like you said, almost borderline like super lemon essential oil, just like like cutting across your tongue.
Hmm. Yeah, and like antiseptic makes it sound weird, but like you're right. It's like
Right. No, but
it's
yeah,
like a clean, like cooling type
no.
sensation.
Yeah, there's a reason I keep drinking it. It's not like it's offensive because there's still like your honey, which is a very interesting and fun honey, is also in there. There's this little bit of mint, a little bit of floral. I've kind of found your raw honey from time to time to be a little like citrusy, like when I just put it straight up on like buttered bread, do a little drizzle. I kind of get a little like orange marmalade out of it.
Mhm. Yeah, it's definitely got light citrus and like menthol stuff going on in the trad. I call it Kung Pao Cousin because like Kung Pao chicken, I think, is traditionally like Szechuan peppercorns and some kind of spicy pepper, I believe. So I call it Kung Pao Cousin because Sansho peppercorns are like a cousin of Szechuan.
Okay.
But I think like that pairing of like the numbing thing with like a spicy pepper, from what I've learned, it seems like that's a pretty traditional Chinese pairing. I because one of the other sources I buy stuff from is this Mala Market, and I believe they're named that because Ma and La, I believe, are like the hot, spicy, and then like the numb, cooling sensations in that like Szechuan cuisine. So the idea is it's like ice cubes with like fire, right? So
Yeah.
it's like this back and forth pairing.
My apologies for the tasting notes video ending somewhat abruptly here, but after talking through his mead, Josh and I ended up going on for a little bit, looking back at our collaborative Better Judge a Mead series from the past summer, and I decided that should be its own standalone video, which I'll post sometime after the new year. But Josh will return for another one of this year's 12 Beers of Christmas videos, where we taste another non-beer beverage, Bevy Long Drink.
Five
golden rings.
Before that, 12 Beers of Christmas kicks back into beer mode with the 5th beer of Christmas, Accumulation Winter Hazy IPA from New Belgium. I'll be joined by Dawson and Dono for tasting notes on that one. It'll be dropping tomorrow on Chop and Brew's YouTube channel.